Welcome to the Formula Bone F1 Show's 2022 French Grand Prix-view. I'm Jared Borislow, but you can call me J-Bone. Let's get into it, folks. J-Bone! Our first order of business today is getting to know the French Grand Prix and its circuit, Paul Ricard. The French Grand Prix was first run as a Formula One World Championship event back in Formula One's first season, the 1950 season, making it one of the 7 original Formula One Grand Prix. The French Grand Prix has been held at a bunch of different circuits since 1950, with the following French circuits all hosting at least one Formula One French Grand Prix: Reims-Gou, Rouen-les-Essarts, Circuit des Charades, Le Mans, Circuit Paul Ricard, Dijon-Premois, and Magny-Cours. It's a lot of circuits for one Grand Prix. Here are a few French Grand Prix facts. Fact 1. The most influential French Grand Prix occurred in 1906, 44 years before Formula One debuted in 1950. The 1906 French Grand Prix is so influential because it was the first race ever to be called a Grand Prix. It was so named because the race featured a Grand Prix, French for grand prize, of 45,000 French francs to the winner. Fact 2. While the French Grand Prix is the home Grand Prix for Frenchmen Pierre Gasly and Esteban Ocon, as well as French manufacturer Alpine, it is actually Charles Leclerc whose hometown is closest to Circuit Paul Ricard, as Monte Carlo, Monaco is under 200 kilometers or 125 miles from Circuit Paul Ricard in the south of France, while Pierre Gasly, Esteban Ocon, and Alpine's French headquarters are all in the north of France, over 750 kilometers or 466 miles away from Circuit Paul Ricard. So it's kind of a little bit of a home Grand Prix for Leclerc. He speaks French. He lives in the French Riviera, you know? Maybe because he has a Monaco curse at his home Grand Prix, he can make the French Grand Prix his new home Grand Prix that he can get P1 in, except, fact 3. This may, unfortunately, be the last French Grand Prix we get for a while, as Circuit Paul Ricard's contract is up at the end of the season, and there are plenty of other potentially more entertaining circuits vying for its spot, such as Kyalami in South Africa. Even as an American, I will say that it's very not fair if the United States has 3 races and neither France nor Germany has 1. Come on, FIA. Come on. Not fair. Now on to the circuit itself. Circuit Paul Ricard in Le Castellet, France, is 5.842 kilometers, or 3.63 miles in length, and the French Grand Prix will be contested over the course of 53 laps around its 15 turns. For those of you wondering, who is Paul Ricard? J-Bone's about to tell you. Paul Ricard was a French industrialist and environmentalist who founded Pernod Ricard, which is now the world's 2nd biggest alcohol seller. Pernod Ricard owns such world-famous alcohol brands as Jameson Irish Whiskey, the Glenlivet, Chivas Regal, Absolute Vodka, Beefeater Gin, Kahlua Coffee Liqueur, and Malibu Coconut-flavored rum. It's a lot of big-name alcohols right there. You can understand why they are the world's 2nd biggest alcohol seller now. Paul Ricard constructed Circuit Paul Ricard near his hometown of Marseille, France in 1969, and the 2022 French Grand Prix will mark the 18th time Circuit Paul Ricard has hosted the French Grand Prix, with the 1971 French Grand Prix being the first one hosted there. Because it contains such a good mix of straights and corners of all different speeds, Circuit Paul Ricard is a very popular test circuit. Now, a complaint about this circuit in the past is that its long, medium-speed corners paired with the old, dirty air-creating aero packages on the F1 cars made following the car in front of you very difficult, which could produce some boring racing. Now, hopefully, the 2022 regulation changes make that less of an issue because you can follow better this year, and hopefully we get an even better race than last year's exciting one, where Red Bulls, both the Red Bulls, past a Mercedes that was in front of them on their way to getting a double podium finish for Red Bull. Very exciting. I believe Max passed Lewis on lap 52 of 53. It's called excitement, folks. Let's get some more of it this weekend. Now, Circuit Paul Ricard is most famous for being one of the weirdest Formula One circuits to watch a race at from home. So it's a weird circuit to watch a race at if you're watching it from your couch in your living room and watching the TV broadcast. Now, why? For starters, its unique abrasive striped runoff areas can mess with your head by looking weird and making you lose track of where the racetrack itself is, because it kind of makes it look like there's a bunch of different racetracks all going around the real racetrack. Very weird. And second, if the runoff areas don't confuse you, the multiple non-labeled additional circuit layouts might. Circuit Paul Ricard has over 160 different possible configurations, and sometimes it can be hard to tell which configuration the cars are driving on, especially, and I mean especially at the Mistral chicane, which includes an insanely confusing crossroads that, when paired with the runoff stripes, looks literally like something out of the movie Tron. There's been a lot of memeing going around about the Mistral chicane. You've probably seen it if you're on F1 Twitter. Very funny Twitter threads going on. But yeah, it's it can look pretty weird. So I would say study the circuit layout for about 15 hours before this race, and then you'll be good to go. You won't get confused. And speaking of weird things at the French Grand Prix, the trophy awarded to the winner of the French Grand Prix is just a giant gorilla for no reason other than they felt like it, which I respect, but it's still pretty bizarre. Giant French gorilla to the winner of the French Grand Prix. Interesting. For tire compounds at the 2022 French Grand Prix, Pirelli have opted for the neutral compound range, the C2 hards, C3 mediums, and C4 softs. Pirelli Motorsport Director Mario Isola had this to say about their choice, quote, "This year's French Grand Prix takes place nearly a month later than it did last year when it rained on Sunday morning, so it's fair to expect warmer temperatures. This year's generation of tires and compounds is different and more resistant to overheating than the 13-inch versions used last year, so we'll have to see how that affects the strategy. A bit of history. Paul Ricard was actually where our 18-inch tires for the current era made their debut at a test with Renault and Sergei Sirotkin back in 2019. End quote. Now a word from our sponsor, BetterHelp. Life throws everyone curveballs from time to time, and going through those situations alone can prove extremely difficult and exhausting. Many people have found having a licensed professional who can help talk them through life's twists and turns to be extremely helpful, and that's what you'll get with BetterHelp. BetterHelp Online Therapy will assess your needs and can match you with your own licensed professional therapist in less than 48 hours. I think everyone should try going to therapy at least once in their life because it works wonders for so many people regarding problems big, small, and everything in between, and BetterHelp is an incredible therapy option. With therapy, it can take a few tries to find the right fit for you. BetterHelp makes it easy and free to change therapists if needed. It's more affordable than traditional offline therapy, and financial aid is available. You can log into your account anytime and send a message to your therapist. Speaking of BetterHelp's therapists, here's an actual testimonial that a BetterHelp user gave about their licensed therapist, Darcy Kelly. Quote, "Darcy makes me feel seen. She makes me feel safe to confront what I need to confront and gives the tools to do it." End quote. BetterHelp is a great way to invest in yourself, and they have a special offer for our listeners. Get 10% off your first month at betterhelp.com/fbone. That's 10% off your first month of online therapy at betterhelp.com/fbone. There's a link for that deal in the description of this episode. Next up, here are your storylines to follow for the 2022 French Grand Prix. The first storyline, can Haas keep their double points finish streak alive at the French Grand Prix? Haas delusion syndrome is the #1 cause of euphoria in humans aged 7 to 55 right now, as Haas are currently on an incredible hot streak with back-to-back double points finishes, despite not yet adding any significant upgrades to their car. It was rumored a while back that they'd be adding a lot of upgrades during the French Grand Prix weekend, but those upgrades have since been pushed back to the following race weekend in Hungary, so we should still be seeing the same apparently incredible Haas car in France this weekend that we saw in Austria and Great Britain. As far as whether or not Haas can keep up this insane hot streak, I think the obvious answer is yes, because they're clearly going to win the World Constructors' Championship this season, so it wouldn't really make sense if they didn't just keep getting double points finishes for the rest of the season at every single Grand Prix. As always, no Haas delusion syndrome, just vibes. The second storyline, how will the French heat wave impact the race? Like much of Europe, France is currently in the midst of a crazy heat wave, bringing record temperatures to the country. As far as ways this could impact the race go, the biggest ones are definitely the increased track surface temperature that this extreme heat will cause, which could massively impact tire strategies and degradation on tires, and also the increased chance for reliability issues due to overheating of mechanical components. This will definitely be something to keep an eye on all week and weekend long, and could potentially cause some big-time chaos. The third storyline, how will Alpine and the two French drivers perform at their home Grand Prix? While France-based Alpine have been putting together a respectable midfield team performance and are currently tied with McLaren at the top of the best of the rest standings at 81 points, with their French driver Esteban Ocon currently P8 in the World Drivers' Championship, getting the lion's share of those 81 points, pun intended by the way, tell Esteban to defend like a lion. Pierre Gasly, on the other hand, is having a far more disappointing season. Through 11 races, Gasly only has 3 points finishes compared to the 8 that he had last season through the first 11 races. Alpine, Ocon, and Gasly will certainly be giving it their all this weekend to impress at their home race, especially given the fact that the French Grand Prix may be leaving the F1 calendar starting next season. The final storyline, will this be the race where Charles Leclerc cements his place in the title fight? The 2022 World Drivers' Championship battle is far from over. In fact, it's only half over. So Leclerc has plenty of time to get his momentum back and start really challenging Max. If Leclerc takes P1 and fastest lap in France and Max DNFs, Leclerc will only be 12 points behind Max going into the Hungarian Grand Prix, which is the final race before the F1 summer break. So it is entirely possible, especially given Red Bull's ongoing reliability concerns, that Leclerc has the World Drivers' Championship lead over Max going into the summer break. But that possibility all starts this weekend, where Leclerc needs to continue chipping away at Max's point total, just like he did in Austria. Real quick before we keep going, if you're enjoying the Formula Bone F1 show and want to help me grow the show, as well as be notified whenever I release new Formula One content, I would really, really appreciate it if you could take 10 seconds right now and subscribe to my YouTube channel, then ring that notification bell to turn on all Formula Bone notifications. I'm also trying to get 1,500 likes on this video episode. If you're able to help me out with that as well, thank you all so much for the support. It means the world to me. J-Bone! Next up, here are my 3 bona-fide race predictions for the 2022 French Grand Prix that I'm about to go 3 for 3 on. Bona-fide prediction number 1, Lewis Hamilton will win the 2022 French Grand Prix. This is the first time all season that I'm predicting a driver other than Max or Leclerc to win a Grand Prix, and here's why. First, Lewis is in impeccable form right now. In the past 3 races, he has 3 P3 podium finishes and a fastest lap award. Second, Mercedes looked great at the Circuit de Barcelona-Catalunya, which, like Circuit Paul Ricard, is another test circuit with a very smooth track surface and good mix of different turns. And third, France, like much of Europe, is experiencing extremely hot temperatures right now. The Paul Ricard track temperature this weekend is going to be running real hot, which could actually help out Mercedes, who are having trouble getting their tires up to temperature this season. This may give Mercedes a tire advantage over some other teams who will be more likely to experience tire overheating. I'm just saying, okay? I went out on a limb here. Some of you are like, oh, J-Bone's playing it a little bit too safe. You think this is safe? It ain't. Bona-fide prediction number 2. Charles Leclerc will finish higher than Max Verstappen at the French Grand Prix. Paul Ricard has a good mix of everything, and I think that favors the Ferrari car over the Red Bull car. Leclerc dominated at another test circuit on a hot race weekend, the Circuit de Barcelona-Catalunya, before his car crapped out on him. So I think that as long as the Ferrari reliability is there, Leclerc should have a great weekend. And bona fide prediction number 3. Alpine will have a double points finish at their home Grand Prix. Alpine are in solid form, and I think they will give the French home fans a couple things to cheer for at Circuit Paul Ricard by making it back-to-back race weekends with a double points finish after they finished P5 and P10 in Austria. Those were J-Bone's bona fide race predictions. Now, I want to hear your bona fide race predictions. Let me see them in the YouTube comment section of this episode, or you can tweet them at me at Formula Bone. Finally here today, I'm going to now give my bona fide pre-race weekend predictions for the top 5 finishers in Sunday's Grand Prix with zero reasoning or explanation. P5, Carlos Sainz. P4, George Russell. P3, Max Verstappen. P2, Charles Leclerc. And P1, Lewis Hamilton. You heard that right. That's it for today's episode of the Formula Bone F1 show. If you enjoyed the show and want to help me out, I'd really appreciate it if you could toss me a comment, like, subscription, rating, review, or any other form of engagement on whatever platform you're on right now, so that said platform and its algorithm like J-Bone more. I respond to most of the YouTube comments on my episodes, and if you don't believe me, try it out. Speaking of YouTube, if you join the Noti Gang by ringing that bell and turning on all Formula Bone YouTube notifications after you subscribe, I will love you forever. For Formula One updates between now and my French Grand Prix recap episode, you can join over 400 members of the Bone Brigade in the Formula Bone Discord server via the invite link that I've placed in the description of this episode. Come join the Discord. You can also follow me on all social media at Formula Bone and at my real name, Jared Borislow. That's at JaredBorislow. Until next time, folks, J-Bone!